Oops. Back. Okay, I am continuing where I left off yesterday. I have a few more tools with me. I have a bin of more neutrals that I was working on another project, and that'll make it easier for me to find neutrals because the other scrap bag had pretty much been picked clean. So I have wonderful colors like this, except they're all really wide. So I will probably have to cut some of them down so that I don't make a repetition of all these wide pieces showing up here. So I'm going to put that aside for now and let's look for a color of some sort. That's way too small. That needs to go in the garbage. I want something colorful, maybe a plaid. That's nice. Let's start garbage over here. There's a blue-green. That's pretty. Oh, what else? That's not very long. After a while, your scraps get kind of picked over and all your favorite ones get removed and you've got stuff left that you're not so happy with. That might be a time to trade with somebody. Set up something at a guild where you do a swap meet, so to speak. Lay them all out on the table and pick through them. Yeah, I know what I'm looking for. And I shouldn't have a preconceived notion because I'll probably never find it because there's probably no more of that wool left in my scrap bin. So let's grab this trusty red one. And if you joined me yesterday, you know my favorite direction to hook is from the bottom up. Most people prefer top down. What I'm going to pay attention to this time today is the actual straight grain of the fabric. And with this particular piece, I'm going to follow it because I've got a little bit of a lean going here, which is fine. I just don't want it to go down the entire rug leaning like that. Can I scoot it closer? Can you still see? Okay. I changed the setup a little bit today, and I'm finding it's a little more awkward for me to hook. I'm going to have to do some more adjusting. I was going to do that pattern today, but I got so involved in changing the setup that by the time I remembered, I had it all set up for hooking. So I'll continue hooking today, and then on another day, I'll do that pattern. Okay, this one I'm hooking, it's still not perfectly in the straight grain, but I followed it and paid attention to it a little bit more than I have with other lines. Okay. Now what next? Now let's put that neutral in. Oh, now I'm gonna wait. I want a darker neutral. What do I have here? It's not a neutral, but it's a blue. That'll work. Hit and miss is a lot about just following your gut. You know, what looks good, what doesn't. Actually, less of what doesn't. If you get too judgmental, particularly in the beginning, you'll never get to a point where you have it filled in. And that's the only way you could truly judge if the hit and miss is going to work with your particular piece. And be careful about getting opinions from other people about what works and what doesn't. When I started the hit and miss on this many, many, many years ago, if you go back to my website, there's a series of posts about my room size rug. And one of the posts that got a lot of attention was the one where I started the hit and miss and the cat's paw. And a lot of people just couldn't see it. They didn't like the hit and miss or the cat's paw with the center of the rug. And if I had listened to that, I would have gotten derailed. And I didn't want to do that. I like what it is, and there's bound to be people who don't like it. And it, quite frankly, was too early to tell if it was going to work or not. I didn't have enough of it hooked. And with a border, you got to have a big chunk of it. Sometimes I'll have a student who'll ask an opinion about, the choice of wool for a border, and they've got like a strip or two hooked in. No, you need to hook in like 6 inches of it solid before you can begin to make an adjustment or a judgment on the colors. You just don't know how it's going to work until you see it all in there. The part I'm working on right now is that little bare section that was over to the right of my frame yesterday. So we'll fill this all in, and then Thursday I'm going to be doing, I have time to do this again live, and hopefully Thursday I can remember to set up for the pattern. Then once I start again in next week, maybe we'll start with the circle part of the rug, the little cat's paw. What I'm hoping is that eventually some of you will be brave enough to actually come on live with me and ask a question. You'll be on camera. You have the microphone, and you'll be able to actually talk back and forth with me. Maybe you can hold up your rug, and I can give you some advice, totally free. I mean, come on, where else can you get that? It helps me to test this technology. One thing, the videos here will, if you're joining us in the middle, the videos here are being recorded automatically, and they get recorded to YouTube. They'll be on this page for a short time until I'm ready to start the next one. And then what's on YouTube is the raw footage. I will then edit it and add in close-up, because I do have a close-up camera right up there. Hopefully I'm not blocking it now. Okay. I'll add in close-up so you can actually see what I'm hooking on. And actually, that camera looks like it's a bit off, and it's going to be filming the back of my hand. Let me take a look at that. See if I can get it untangled. And see if I can bring it over here a little bit more. Okay, that might be a little bit better. So we'll try that angle. Whoops, sorry. Let's get this hooked up. And I'll have them edited. Once the videos are shot live here, they're recorded, they get automatically uploaded to YouTube. And then I will take the raw footage, which is what's on YouTube, and I will edit it down, get rid of some of the points where I'm adjusting for technology, and I will add in close-up shots so that you can actually see a little bit more of what I'm doing. I'm really limited with this camera by how much I can see. And I'm going to start here. Start over a little bit further. I'm going to straighten this part out too. I don't mind them being crooked. What I do mind is if, and part of it I think was yesterday, the way I was sitting with the frame, I was kind of crooked. I wasn't straight on with the frame, and that was adjusting for the camera. And I think what happened is that, you know, some of these are leaning because that's, you know, the direction I was sitting. And while it's crooked, it's too consistently crooked to look right. So I'm going to straighten it out. I'm going to leave what's there. What's there is fine. I just want to straighten it out. I don't want a whole series of things going crooked, because again, that ends up being too regular. And this one, I think I'm just going to swoosh over and make this really crooked. And just connect up with that orange stripe that I just did. Now, I'm ending on a curved angle. So you might have noticed on some of the other ones that I've done that I will kind of squeeze in an extra tail, maybe more than what I would if I was ending at a straightaway. And I'll put it off to a side so that when I snip it, it fills in nice and neat. Now, this past weekend when I was at Sauter Village, and I was talking to some people about loops, and one of the gals who's new was hooking and was worried about the shape of her loops. Actually, yeah, that'll fit. And she was worried that her loops were too messy. And I don't mind messy loops, and I don't mind loops that are all different sizes. This blue up here, you probably can't see it from this camera angle, hopefully from the one above. It's a little bit higher than that one. It doesn't matter. Once the rug is steamed and then walked on it, there's a patina that develops on the rug, and you'll never see any of that kind of stuff. And if you waste time on all of that, you never get to the point where the rug is actually on the floor. And that's the ultimate goal. That's what we want. We want this rug to be finished and on the floor. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to rush through it and try to get it done as fast as I can, because I really do think rug cooking is a journey. I'm ending up with a little bit of extra space over here that I just noticed. It's kind of starting right about there. So I'm going to pop back and I'm going to pull up a loop right here sideways. And fill in that spot just so that it doesn't end up being too weak. And then I'll pull up a loop that way, maybe one this way. Looks like I need one more here. And then I can probably start hooking regular. To me, that's preferable than having a little tiny stretch of something that maybe I have to go back and fill in with a little tiny piece, or squeeze too much in and then cause packing. Oh, and this isn't quite going to fill it up. So I'm going to need a little something to top that off. Okay. Cut some ends. See here, I picked up this piece, and if I was working on just this end, we talked about this yesterday, well, I have a couple places to choose, not as many. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places where I can put this. And if I was working this way on a solid line, this would be the only one I'd have. And that's too close in value. That's okay, but I like it much better over here, particularly against that orange. So I'm going to start it down here and then work my way up. What time is it? It's 10:02. Now's the time that I am scheduled to go live. So if you've joined me, welcome. I'm hooking hit and miss on my room size rug. I tend to start a little bit on the early side. So if you get here before 10, or if you've got time before 10, just kind of tune in. If you missed it, the replay will be on YouTube, so you can watch the whole video there. But I do that because it takes me so long to get this equipment set up that I overestimate the time it's going to take. And then when I get it done, I'm standing around twiddling my thumbs. So I'd rather just kind of jump in and get started. Once I'm doing this with actual lessons and we're doing actual consultations and more into the regular part of the program that I have planned, then I will start on time. Right now, the start time is 10-ish. I'm usually no more than 15 minutes early. Okay, so now I need a little bit more of that, because that piece isn't going to be long enough. Yeah, let's pick something else. This one. I'm kind of ambivalent on where that one needs to go. So I'm going to put it in the biggest spot, which is right here. Let's talk a little bit about beginning rug cooking. One thing I've noticed in teaching workshops is that you get people of all different skill levels, all different experiences, and usually you learn from a friend who learned from a friend who learned from a friend, and you might not have all the core information that you might need about rug cooking. So when I start beginners, it's basically, a simple stick the hook in, pull up a loop. That's the basic technique. And then now go repeat it a couple million times and you have a rug. But there's always, how far apart do you put them? See, that's twisted. Don't matter to me. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm just going to pull it down to the height. How high do you pull it? And that is generally however high the rest of the loops are, or pull it up as high as it is wide. Now there is a trend, and a wonderful trend, I think, and it takes a bit of determination and exercise, practice to get this look right, and that's to pull them up super high. It makes walking on them really special. I mean, it feels so good. It's like a deep pile carpeting. You can't go wrong with that. It's a blue-gray. And I would recommend, doing that, like a practice up front. But everybody has a certain height. Beginners tend to put the loops too close together, and don't pull them up high enough. When the loop comes up, it needs to bloom. It needs to come up and then open up. So if you look at the tops of your loops, and if what you're seeing are little straight skinny lines, you're not putting them far enough apart. And you can also tell by pushing on it. There should be a little bit of give. It should not be rock hard. People are always worried about the backing showing. And quite frankly, that is rarely a problem on a rug. And you should be able to crack the rug and see the backing. That's perfectly normal. The problem with packing is that it'll make extra stress on your backing. And the backing is the weakest point of our rugs. And if you put too many loops in, you're making it automatically that much more difficult for your backing to survive. So you don't want to do that. Here's a color. I like that one up in there. So I'm going to find where I've got a space, which doesn't start till way down here. And I'm going to pull that first loop up, or the tail up sideways. Instead of turning it so it's this way, I'm going to turn it this way. That first loop is going to come up sideways, which is why my hook is down here at the base. And then I might do a couple of those until I get enough real estate that I can turn the loop the normal way with my hook going sideways. And it's filling that up nicely. Probably won't be enough to fill it up all the way. I'm going to follow the peach over to the left. And then I just need a little bit of something there to fill in. And I'll do the same thing down here. I'll start it down in the point, and then I'll turn it. And then begin hooking in the normal direction and to fill it in. Okay, and I'm realizing that it is very difficult to carry on this conversation and hook at the same time, especially when I'm thinking about something. So what I was talking about with the beginners, our beginning hooking, is that the other issue besides height is how far apart do you put them? And how far apart do you put them going this way? And how far apart do you put them going side by side? You can overcrowd either way. Generally speaking, I do not move the loop and kind of dig around in there so I can see how many threads there are. I simply just kind of shove it in where I think the next loop should live. It allows me to hook much faster. It's less stressful. I'm not counting. I don't need my reading glasses to see it because I don't need to see the individual threads. And it just makes everything a whole lot easier. Now I'm getting into a skinny part here, so I'm going to take it and bring that one loop up sideways, and there's really just enough room for a tail. And I'll bring the tail up sideways. Okay, and then I got a tiny little bit to fill in down there, and then it'll be all done. What color can I put in there? I don't have much purple in my scrap bag, so I think I'm going to have to start maybe cut some purple. This is a super wide cut, and it'll fill up this space really nicely down here, which is a little bit on the wide side. But then as I work my way up, it's going to be too big. So I'll turn, again, that loop sideways. And this really only pertains to wide cut, because in narrow cuts, particularly like 3s or 4s, the loop is the same size in all 4 directions. So turning it doesn't really get you anything, but it does in the wide cuts. Okay, we got, that can go up that side. I'm gonna take that same dark that I did there and put it up here. I'm gonna go up against this one, mainly because it's the same cut size as that, and I don't want them side by side, which probably wouldn't be an issue, but variety is the spice of life. And this will give me a little skinny spot because this is not quite filling up that spot. So I'll take a smaller cut and work that in, rather than doing that stacking bit that I did in the last video, or I did it, did I stack them here? Oh yeah, this little bit right here that I did there, where I turned some sideways and added in more than just a single row. But I really don't want to do that with this one because it's so dark, it's very prominent, and it is very wide. Although it's getting skinnier because I'm twisting them a little bit. That's okay. Let's keep going. That one came out nice and full. I'm definitely going to have to change this frame for the next time because I tilted it a little bit more to make it easier to see on camera, but now it's too low for my arm. So I'm bending over in a very uncomfortable direction. And we'll fill that up right there. Okay. I just noticed that my overhead close-up camera has gone black. So I think the battery is gone. So bear with me for a minute while I untangle myself from my spot. And I see if my battery's charged up. And then take this off of here. I noticed this happened yesterday, and I was getting some really nice close-up shots when I edited the other video. And then at a certain point, poof, it just died. But I didn't hear it die yesterday. So today I'm kind of aware of it and watching for it. Okay, let me turn it on. Check the view. And record. And I still have my hook in my hand. That's a good thing. Okay. You can still see me. I didn't bump things too bad. So I need something that's going to go up there. I'm going to grab this one. It's probably not long enough. So I think what I'm going to do is start it here and then work my way up. I'll have to find something else for the bottom and possibly the top if I get all the way up there and it's not enough to fill it in. And if you get a spot that's a little skinny, like this is, you can turn it sideways, come back to regular. gonna have enough. Oh, maybe just enough to come over here to the edge, but not enough to fill in that little tiny point. So I'm gonna have to come up with something else. Here's a little tiny piece of bright orange. I'll just kind of get that in there and fill up this little spot. And then we'll trim. Leave that. Okay, I've got this little section right there. What do we put in there? I don't have much yellow cut either. Let's go with this one. Although that's going to need a wider cut. This is way too thin. Well, I can double it up. Let me show you how I did that again. Because if I hook that there, you can still see, I force that loop back, that there's a spot there. So I'm just going to go over, hook another loop a little bit sideways. And I'm just going to kind of tumble them in there until I can make them go in the normal direction. And then I'm good to go. Okay. All of that is filled in. So I am ready to move this thing, which is a monumental task because this sucker is so heavy. I actually have to stand up and go to the other side of the frame because that's where the bulk of the rug is. Get this up and out of the way so I can get my feet under. And at this point, I'll check my gripper bars to make sure they're positioned in a good spot. This one's getting old. This side tends to wear out when you do a really big rug. It doesn't, it gets pulled on so much that it tends to move a lot in the frame. So you have to constantly watch for that. That's good. That's a halfway point. I know from the way the scroll is. And I don't like it too low on the frame, and I don't like it too high. There's that little, wonderful little sweet spot. One question I often get asked with a room size rug is, don't you use a bigger frame? Well, I don't, mainly because my arm is only so long. If the frame was bigger, it wouldn't matter. I couldn't reach the other side anyways. So I'd still have to move it just as much. Okay, let me, kind of lost track of the comments in case anyone's asked a question. Let me go out and grab that. And then go back. hi, Judy. Lost your audio. And then now it's back. Good. Okay, so here we are. Speaking of coffee, where did I put my teacup? Why is it? Stand up with that sound thing in my pocket. Why is it that when you get to a certain point in, I'm going to say, in your creativity, where creativity becomes very important. I'm not going to say when you get to a certain age, but when you get to a certain point in your creativity, that you end up spending as much time saying, where did I put that, as you do dealing with it. Now, this is one part of the rug where I still need to flesh out the 3 rows of border. I had initially tried just one, and it looked very flat. This rug is quite large, so it needed the 3 rows to get started. So I'm going to have to find some of that black and hook those 3 rows in, or simply hook, hit, and miss over here until I can find it. So let's see what I've got. Got some miscellaneous. And the black that I'm using is the black from my antique background. But quite frankly, you can put almost anything with it, just as long as it's super dark. Because this one happens to be the more black version of that. I have a blacker version and a browner version. This one up here is the browner version. What was I talking about with the beginner hooking? Push in, pull up the loop. That's the basic technique. Pull them up as high as they are wide. And how far apart do you put them? You put them far enough apart where they're not crowding each other. One way to tell is when you hook a single line of your rug hooking. Take a look at it from the side, hold it up and look at it from the side. And if it looks like the loops are leaning towards the empty space, then they're too close. If they're standing nice up and tall, the way they should, then they're good. If you look straight down on them with the backing flat and you see backing, then you need to go closer together. I have yet to find a big beginner who puts them that far apart, except for my granddaughter when she was in the 2nd grade. And she had white spaces showing between her loops. You might notice that I am not turning my frame. A lot of people will buy a frame based on how well it turns. Well, once you get to a rug of this size, it's difficult to move it from one place to another like you just saw, but it's impossible to turn it around. If every time I changed a direction, if I had to spin my hook in that direction, I would spend a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of time just managing the whole rest of the rug that's hanging out there. Plus, it would be impossible in some places to get my arm underneath from those directions. I'm working the outside borders, and I've got the rest of the backing sewn up into this bundle so that when I put my arm underneath, I don't have to lift up a bunch of backing in order to get underneath. And this actually has probably more of it undone on this side than it does in other places for whatever reason. So you don't want your loops too far apart, but you definitely don't want them too close together. think of them as soldiers, and their feet cannot and should not touch. If their feet touch, they're going to fall over. Imagine trying to stand next to someone. Your shoulders are touching, and now you got to put your feet touching. You're going to have to really hang on to each other because one of you or both of you are going to fall over. And that's exactly what happens with the loops. So you need to put them far enough apart. There wasn't hardly anything there. You need to put them far enough apart that they can freely stand on their own. Okay, a little bit more on that side. These cut sizes are kind of all over the place, which I think adds a little bit of variety to the hooking. When I first started, I think I mentioned this yesterday or maybe in another video earlier on, that this row right here was initially hooked perfectly straight. And you can see now it's quite lumpy bumpy. I still follow that straight line that I had when I hooked the centerpiece. And I allowed myself to stray 3 rows this way and 3 rows that way, no further. Then I made a special effort to be sure that I didn't have a perfect wave. I wanted it to be irregular. I didn't want any kind of a pattern or a repeat in that. Once I got the center hooked, I hooked the 2 next to it and made it a little bit more crooked. Makes it a little less formal, more casual, which is what I was going for on this rug. And I like the look of it so much better that I ended up tearing out that entire line from around the entire rug. I had the whole thing hooked. And then once I discovered crooked, it was like, okay, that needs to go away. That needs to be a lot less straight. So what'll happen here when I use some of these other cuts that are quite bigger, it just makes this line a little bit thicker, kind of along the same trend as what that one is. Oh, I was talking too about hooking in all directions. I just sat down one day and decided that I was going to teach myself how to do that. I worked with a teacher who thought turning your frame was evil. I don't necessarily believe that. If that's what you want to do, fine. But if you want to learn how to hook in all directions, I'll teach you that too. But you actually save a lot of time by not turning your frame around all the time. And the way to do that is to change the direction of your hooking. You can see here how my hook is perpendicular to the direction that I'm hooking. So as I come up to this curve, see how it's changing direction? And I'll get to a certain point. I lost the thing on the bottom. There we go. You'll get to a certain point where you just physically can't make your arm go any further over. And then you come down from the underside. And I usually kind of shifted my seat sometimes. Sometimes I'll bring my arm in through the side to go in the other direction. The other thing that I'm using, this is rug warp, and this is the old rug warp. This is woven much tighter than what the new stuff is. In fact, here you can see where the fold was on the fabric. This piece of rug warp is 3 3/4 yards long and 200 inches wide, which is 16 2/3 feet. So it's quite a big piece. So this is an imperfection that I just have to work around. And that is so dense. I don't know if it shows up on the camera. It might show up on the overhead, which is totally in the wrong spot. Let me fix the camera. I'm filming into space. That must have happened when I moved the camera. Or moved the thing. Okay. Yeah, so you might be able to see here the imperfection that is. If you could see the rest of the setup, you would know what I'm dealing with that. So that, I'll need an extra camera to do that. Okay. So I'm pulling up this strip and I'm using a wide shanked hook. I like a really wide shank because what I'm doing on these places where I know it's going to be difficult for me, I'm pushing it way down and it's making quite a big hole. Let me do it out here in the opening. You push it down and it leaves quite a big hole, so it makes it a little bit easier to come up. And when you pull it up, you want to push down a little bit until you get the loop through. That way you avoid the front of the hook getting stuck like this in the backing. So when you go in, push down when you're pulling up the loop, which is kind of weird, but once you get used to it, it works out pretty good. I'm getting really close to the end. And I want to connect this up. It looks like I'll just barely make it. Okay, good to go. A little twisted, but it's in there. That's what counts. Okay. So now we're back to where we were yesterday a little bit, where I've got the freedom to set up some new lines. And basically, I just sort of randomly grab someplace. This one's quite a small cut. This is probably a 5. Where the one I was just hooking is probably an 8.5. Could be a 9. It is important on hit and miss that you have sort of a starting place and an ending place, which is why I wanted to get that extra dark done. I want to continue that little piece with something. This is not the same wool, but it's about the same value. It's roughly the same color. So close enough. Okay. Grab one of these beiges because I know I got some nice long ones. Just going to kind of come out here and just set it up. Okay, what were we talking about beginning hooking? You want to sort of guide the strip from the back so that it lays flat against the backing. If you have trouble with things leaving big loops on the back, just concentrate on that and kind of pay attention to it for a while, and then before you know it, it'll be happening automatically. If you have a problem where when you pull up a loop, see if I can do it the wrong way, the last one pulls out like that one did, okay, get it down. What you want to do is pull it up in the direction that the work is already hooked. And what happens is it becomes a physics thing. So when you've got your strip and it's in the backing and you pull on it this way, it pulls the top. When it's in the backing and you pull it this way, it pulls on the top. So if this is attached to your loop's coming out. So it's just a matter of being aware of it and rolling it toward the work that's done. And then that way it'll stay there. For me, it's a bit of a function too of the backing. Rug warp holds the loops much tighter. Now see, that one's twisted. I'm not gonna mess with it. We're just gonna leave it in there. Okay, what else do we have? There's a piece, kind of a statement color. It's a longer strip, so let's put that over here. Again, another twisted loop. See how much smaller that is? This is cut perfectly even. But some of those are coming up a little bit on the skinny side, and that's because it sort of folded over. I don't even slow down for it. That's just part of the irregular look that I like. Now if that bugs you, you can pull it up extra high, get it all straightened out, and then pull it back down. But I don't think that's necessary. It spends a lot of more time. Okay, colors. Here's a piece of blue. It's a little on the shorter side, so I'm going to put one here. It's another thick strip, and I'm pulling it up, and it's getting a little bit twisted and buckled. Now it's straightening out. Twist this one a little bit, point it over to the side a little bit so it's not perfectly straight. Let's venture into this really tight area and get a strip in there. And all it really takes is just a little bit more time. You can't hook quite as fast because you've got to sink your hook a little bit further into it just to get that opening. And I'm often asked by people who are new to rug hooking, you know, how do the loops stay in? And it's because it does this. The fibers, as you're putting and making that bigger, it's pushing the fibers together so that they get closer. And what happens then is that it just sort of pinches that loop. It gets stronger and stronger the more loops you put into the backing. That one's twisted. That's okay. Actually finding myself, I'm not in the thick spot, I'm in the area next to it, but that's okay. Oh, I'm gonna run out. Here's a red. What can I put? The red? I'm gonna put the red next to that neutral. How are we doing on time? Oh, 10:40. A little over. I'm going to finish this strip and then sign off for the day. I'll be back tomorrow, which is what, Thursday. Friday, I have a class, so I might tune in with the class. Depends on how it goes. And that'll be, again, always 10 o'clock, sometimes a bit before, but always between 10 and 10:30. And then the reviews or the replays are available on YouTube. You can see yesterday was the first one that I kept because the other days had an awful lot of technical issues in the editing. So yesterday was the first one I kept. But I'll pick this up tomorrow around 10 o'clock. If I can change the camera setup, I'll do that pattern that I've been needing to work on. So that's it for now. I'll see you later, and thanks for joining me. Okay, there's got to be